everybody. Welcome. It is Shadow at Night for Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025. On the show tonight, well, the NCI is getting going in another couple of weeks in Edmonton. They've got a series of hearings lined up in early March, and the subject this time around is going to be simply, are our children safe? Tonight, we have one of the commissioners of the NCI on the show. His name, as you know, is Ken Drysdale, and Ken is a regular guest on the show, and Ted Kuntz, who is the chairman of the NCI. We'll bring those two gentlemen on in just a couple of seconds. Some quick hellos tonight. Who's here? Who's watching? Where are you watching from? Joan is watching in Saint Anne de la Rochelle, Quebec. Hello, Joan. How are you? Linda's watching in Trenton. Hello, Joy, watching in Glenboro, Manitoba. John is watching tonight. I just heard that Trump had another assassination attempt by a drone, but his security team shot it down. That's what John says. All right, we'll look into that as the show goes on. Dan is watching tonight from Ross, Manitoba. Hello, Greg, watching in Kingston. Roseanne is in southern Manitoba, watching on YouTube. Christine is in Anola. Leanne is watching in Merrickville, Ontario. Jeannie is watching in Stonewall, Manitoba. And over on Rumble, who is watching there tonight? Jimmy James is watching. Esky Dogs, Patricia 0711, North Scotty, Potion 13, Crivier, Vilma, Gary Goodman, Nutsy, Cheryl is watching tonight. Hello. Who else? Seacross is watching tonight. Wherever you're watching from tonight, you guys, whatever platform you happen to be watching on, get it out there. Please like and share to as many people as you possibly can. By the way, last night's explosive episode with Dr. William Mackis has so far garnered over 30,000 views across platforms. And if you haven't seen that episode yet, I suggest you get on it, because he dropped some figurative bombs last night, and not just on one particular group of people. There was several bombs dropped last night, and you got to go and watch for yourself. If you missed Dr. William Mackis on last night before, we had Carrie Simpson on talking about the situation in Edgewood, British Columbia, with the 400 ostriches that the CFIA wants to kill. Some people say cull, I say kill. Now, here's an update for you quickly. I don't have a lot on this yet. Maybe we'll bring Carrie back on at some point later on this week. But the CFIA has now appealed the decision by the federal court judge that came in a couple of weeks ago, protecting the birds for at least 30 days while they go through different testing. CFIA has gone to the Appeals Court of Canada to appeal that judge's decision, suggesting that he overstepped his boundary, and that court hearing is set for later on this week. Legal opinion is right now that they haven't really got much of a chance at overturning the ruling, but you never know, so we'll soon see. We were having some trouble streaming to the website tonight, shadowdavis.com, but everything is up and running right now. So if you're an All Access member and you regularly watch on the website, it's okay to go back there right now. We're also running on Telegram tonight in the Shadow at Night community there with over 500 members. We're on X, we're on Rumble, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, and we are on Facebook. And we'll be right back in just a second with Ken and Ted from the National Citizens Inquiry. Okay, there we got the name placard straightened away. That's good. Well, you see, I had also this one just in case Ken appeared in the middle. I have no idea when I have more than two guests on the show. I have no idea where you guys are going to be placed on the screen, so I have to make sure that I've got all my bases covered. So I'll switch it back to where it should be. There's Ted Kuntz. He is the well, you're the big guy with the NCI, right, Ted?
No, I think Ken's the big guy. Let's give credit where credit is due. He's the he's the workhorse in all of this.
He has written some very, very long reports, that's for sure. Ken Drysdale, obviously one of the commissioners of the National Citizens Inquiry. Both of you gentlemen, welcome to the show. You've got some hearings coming up at the beginning of March. Would you please tell us what they're all about this time?
You jump in, Ken. You're
Go ahead, Ken. Oh, Ken's gone. I guess it's your turn, Ted.
Well, as you said, the topic of these hearings is the question, are children safe in Canada? And that was the same question we asked in Vancouver in October. And the testimony that we heard was so disturbing, I think is the right word, that we realized that we needed to hold further hearings on that topic. Ken and I were in an interview a couple of nights ago, and he talked about the kind of testimony that was shared in Vancouver, and it was actually gut wrenching. The situation is worse than I thought it is here in Canada, Shadow. When we did the first 10 city hearings, they were all about COVID and the impact of COVID. But this was a wider topic, and so we touched on everything from vaccine injury to child sex trafficking to the transgender movement to the failure of our law enforcement and child protective services to actually protect children and support families. And there's more to be uncovered.
Interestingly, who's the guy from the Bureau? I think his name is Sam. I keep wanting to say Sam Cooke. It's not Sam Cooke. Cooper, yeah. And he's been working on uncovering the fentanyl trade. And he's been working on that for several years now. But there was a video that I found floating around on X, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and it was very disturbing. I put it on the show, and it was a young lady who was walking through the park near the ports in Vancouver, and she was yelling and screaming in profanities. And she was quite adamant that there were people in those containers, and you can hear them screaming and yelling every single night. Did you hear any testimony like that during your last go around?
No, Ken?
We had testimony about child trafficking, and it was the very first testimony in our Vancouver hearings. And they went into great detail, but more in general terms about how trafficking was, what the volumes of people were that were being trafficked in the world, what those volumes were in Canada. And it was fascinating, because the witness talked about how these people get pulled in, particularly girls, how they get pulled in to the whole trafficking issue. And it's very, it was a shock to me. They were talking about a number of different processes, but the main one, the most used one, is what they called, Ted, it was called the Romeo complex or something, wasn't it? And so they have these young men who are perhaps in their 20s, but they look like they're like 16 and 17, and they go to the high schools, and they actually enroll as a high school student, and then they befriend these girls. They start dating them. They meet the parents, and slowly, and over months, they're very patient people. Over a number of months, they get a firmer grip on these young girls, and then they turn them because maybe they're in trouble. Maybe they tell them the story they're going to be killed because they owe some money. And
wait a minute, when you say they turn them, you mean they turn them against their parents, their families, everybody they've ever known their whole lives?
No, they turn them. What I mean by that is all of a sudden this boyfriend who met the parents, and the parents love him because he's very, very kind of clean cut and very polite. And anyway, when he starts to get the girl really into this relationship, he'll come to her and he'll be crying. And he'll say, I owe some money and they're going to kill me, or they're going to beat me, or they're going to kill my things. But there's a way out of this, but I just can't ask you. And then the way out of this, you have to sleep with somebody, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And the girl often does it, and they're filming at the same time. And then the girl thinks it's over, but they pull out these photos and these videos, and they're going to show them to their school. And so now they've got a grip of them, and this poor child just gets drawn into this trap. And it's shocking, Shadow. And again, that testimony was, I believe, the first one in the Vancouver hearings. And you could have heard a pin drop when this person was going into such detail and how manipulating they were. It's incredible.
What was it? One of the girls testifying?
No, it was. We did have a girl testifying, though. She was the last witness, and she grew up in Saskatchewan and started being abused in the home due to alcoholism of her parents and a split up marriage. And then she was trafficked into Edmonton for many years, and became a prostitute, and then was in the strip clubs, and It's just a horrendous story about how it happened, just as being a very young girl. I think, Ted, she was, 13 years old when she was trafficked?
It was very disturbing. And then one of those stories, Ken, that I remember is the Kelly Lynn, who had been sexually abused as a child, and the counselors convinced her the way to be safe was for her to transition from a female to a male, which she did for about 20 years, and then realized that she was not a male, she was a female, and that rather than provide her with therapy, they convinced her to transgender. And a horrific story, but she was such a beautiful soul. I mean, in spite of all that abuse and that adversity, she now is becoming vocal and telling her story because she wants to help others. And you realized the same with that young woman that was child sex trafficked. I mean, I was so moved when she's telling her story. Like the place is crying. People are crying as they're listening to this story. And you wonder, how is this going to end? And then you realize that they have found a way to transform their adversity into being of service to humanity. And just, I mean, talk about moving testimony.
Yeah.
How prevalent would you fellas say this is?
I believe that the witness that we're talking about said that there were, Ted, help me out, I think he was saying, or she was saying, there was 17,000 in Canada involved in that child sex trade.
I don't remember the numbers, Ken, offhand, but I remember being very disturbed when I heard the numbers. Like, it was way beyond what I thought happens in this beautiful country of Canada. And I realized there's a really dark side to this country. Law enforcement is not protecting them. They're often complicit in it. Child Protective Services is often complicit in it. And so you come away from this saying, we have a big problem here in Canada. I thought these things happen in Thailand or other places, but we have a problem in Canada.
Well, they do happen in Thailand, but we don't realize that it happens in Canada. And the more we talk about it, the better off we're going to be, I believe. Yeah. Why does the corporate media pay no attention to this issue? I mean, this is something that, and no, I understand what you guys believe in them, and I believe the same. But Cooper today on a show that I'm going to play tonight on the extension here for the All Access crowd after 9:00 Central, he talks about every level of our law enforcement and our court system and our media being compromised by Chinese gangs or maybe Iranian gangs or Indian gangs even. And when I say Indian, I'm talking about Indian over across the ocean. I mean, did you hear any of that kind of testimony in the last round?
Yeah, in the Vancouver hearings, the witness talked about that. And by the way, that was Leah Dundas who talked about that. I just brought up my list because I couldn't remember. My apologies to Leah. But yeah, she talked about that. She actually spent time overseas in Thailand and a number of places. She said they were just incredibly dangerous. And what she said was happening was a lot of these young girls overseas are being trafficked into sexual slavery by their families, because the families are starving to death. They got 6 kids at home, mom and dad, and they have no way to make an income. So these gangs come in and they say, well, we can take your daughter and we're going to bring her to such and such a place, and she's going to work in a restaurant or in a tourism resort or something. So they sell the child, and then she gets brought into prostitution in the city, and there's no getting out. It's like cartels and gangs that are running this thing, and it's international. It's a corporate business. And Shadow, one of the things that shocked me the most with Leah Dundas's testimony is she talked about how these young girls are commoditized. They're just commodities. And they said it is more profitable than drugs, because with drugs, and this is a really interesting point. She said that with drugs, when the dealer sells whatever it is, heroin or whatever, they've got to go out and they get their money. They've got to go out, take that money, and they've got to buy more heroin and bring it in and then sell it again. But with these young children, they put them out, they use them, and the child is still there. It doesn't cost them anymore. And so they just keep rotating it with really no additional costs. And it's shocking. And that's why it's such a huge trade, because the cost for them, there's no reoccurring costs until, of course, these children end up dead. And they said that Leah testified that the average survival rate for these children, I believe she said the average time when they get trafficked, they're about 12 years old. And by the time they're 17, they're dead.
They're talking in the United States about releasing the Epstein list. And the day that Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of everything she was convicted of, I think it was the year before last, there's a young lady named Sarah Ransom who spoke to media. And somehow this made it onto network news. And here's a clip. It's about 45 seconds.
I have spent the last 17 years in my own prison for what she, Jeffrey, and all the co-conspirators did to me. I was raped repeatedly. I was raped 3 times a day sometimes. And I was not the only girl on that island. There was a constant stream of girls being raped over and over and over again. And yes, Ghislaine must die in prison, because I've been in hell and back for the last 17 years.
And 27 for me.
I was 10 years old when Liz Stein was being trafficked. I was 10. That is how long the sex trafficking ring has been going on.
When we talk about missing and murdered women, Indigenous women in this country, that's been a big thing in Canada for the last few years. And they created a commission, Trudeau did, and all of that stuff. And they never got anything done. They never accomplished much. I think they released a list of recommendations, whatever. Is that all a part of this?
Well, I think what you realize is the government and the law enforcement are not actively solving this crime. And so you've got to question, is it incompetence? Are they complicit? Is there higher ups that are calling them off? I mean, you look at the Helen Grews case, who looked into the deaths of infants and simply asked the question whether the mother had received the vaccine, and she's being punished and may lose her career for asking questions, for doing what we expect police officers to do. The fact that the Ontario Police Services don't uphold somebody like a Helen Grews and celebrate her, but instead attack her, it sends a very chilling message to every police officer to say, don't look into things that we don't want you to look into.
What about the pornography that's been in schools? Did you hear any testimony like that? And the reason I ask that is because I've got a new clip from Railen Fox. She's a young mom in Manitoba. She's been putting out a series of videos, and the series is called "Those Books Aren't in My Kid's School," sarcastically. And then she reads passages from several of these pornographic, in some cases, gay, transsexual pornographic books that are available to kids as young as 7 or 8 years old. And she's got a new video out that I'm going to play a little bit later on in the show. Have you heard a lot of that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, we had multiple testimonies about that from parent groups, educators. We had one fellow who testified who had been on the school board for 20 years. He was a parole officer for at-risk children for years and years, and he was up against this and was taken to court and was smeared in the press nationally. We had a lot of testimony about this. So as you know, on the Vancouver hearings, which happened just this past October, I believe we had 34 witnesses. We're currently writing the new report, and there's a whole section, that's not true, there's probably a dozen sections in this new report that has to do with sexualization of children, has to do with pornography. It has to do with the alienation of the children and their parents, loss of parental control, curriculums in the schools, SOGI programs. This new report, which we're hoping to get out in the next month and a half or so, is dynamite. And they're huge, very detailed sections that go through exactly what you're asking about. We had multiple testimonies.
Vaccine injuries, I guess we can go to you with this one, Ted. And I'm going to throw this up on the screen here because I was just looking through the website, the Canadian government website, and we came across this here. And this is alarming how many vaccines these children have to go through right from birth, essentially. Look at this. You've got one at 2 months, one at 4 months, one at 6 months, and you've got one at 12 months or between 12 and 23 months. And then you go a little bit further down the chart here. Like, look at all that: rotavirus, tetanus, diphtheria, hepatitis B, measles, mumps, rubella, human papillomavirus, influenza. This is insane. I don't know exactly how many of these vaccines that they have to take, these kids. I'm thinking it's probably in the 60s or 70s. You would know better than I.
Well, Shadow, if you follow the recommended schedule that's put out by Health Canada and you add the COVID shot, which they're now suggesting twice a year, you add the RSV, which they're now recommending, influenza shot, before the age of 18, your child will receive over 100 shots. And the other piece that needs to be understood is the vaccine manufacturers are not liable for injury or death caused by their products. So it's the only product that we have on the market where the manufacturer is not liable for harm caused by their products. Like, to me, that's so egregious. We're giving this product to healthy children and we're making them sick. And there's no accountability there. And those like myself who have been bringing awareness of vaccine injury for 40 years are told that we're dangerous, we're a public health threat, we're anti-science, we're a danger to society. It's disturbing. We had a number of experts testify at the Vancouver hearings about the harms of the vaccine paradigm. One in particular was Dr. Paul Thomas, a pediatrician out of Oregon, that conducted vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies because he was one of the few pediatricians that would honor informed consent. And as a result of that, he had probably the largest patient population of unvaccinated and partially vaccinated children in America. Because in America, that most pediatricians, if you don't fully vaccinate, they kick you out of their practice. And the reason they kick you out is they receive bonus money for having a highly vaccinated population. And Dr. Thomas said that he's probably lost $1 million in bonus money for not having a high enough vaccination rate in his practice.
You know, I saw the Gal and who was it now? The Harper guys did a video on Facebook the other day, Vaughn and Gal, and they were talking about kids being suspended from school. Now, this is in Ontario. I'm not sure if this is happening in other provinces, but kids are being suspended from public schools there if their parents do not consent to the vaccine schedule.
Which is illegal, by the way.
What are they supposed to do? I mean, but this is what the government is saying. So when we talk about illegal, now we have to go to court to say go against the government again?
Yes.
Like, what's going on here?
Well, there's 2 provinces in Canada that have vaccine requirements for kids to attend school, but those 2 provinces have personal belief and religious exemptions. So you simply have to say, I'm not interested, thank you very much, make you fill out a piece of paper and sign it. But the medical system and the school system do not tell parents that they have that option. So if you were to survey most parents in those provinces, they believe that their children have to be fully vaccinated to go to school, which is a lie. But the other thing they're doing that I think is even more egregious is they're setting up vaccine clinics in schools and vaccinating our children without the knowledge or consent of parents. There was just an email that went around this week of a vaccine clinic in a school on Vancouver Island. And in the letter that was sent around, they said it was telling the teachers not to tell the students that there's a vaccine clinic coming because it makes them anxious, and not to tell the parents because what they've noticed is that when the parents know when the vaccine clinics are, the school attendance drops those days. So they're intentionally denying the students and the parents the knowledge that there's going to be a vaccine clinic. And then what I can tell you they do is they set up the clinic in the gymnasium or the cafeteria, and they announce over the announcements, all grade 11 students report to the cafeteria. So they all come down in a herd, and they'd simply say, roll up your sleeve and stand in line. And that what they justify is they say, if you roll up your sleeve, you're consenting to the vaccine. That's what's called implied consent.
Just by rolling up your sleeve. Oh, come here. I got the needle fight. Like, seriously, what if you just got an itch you want to get to?
This is happening in schools in Canada. To me, it makes a lie of informed consent. It makes a lie of parental authority to make medical decisions for their children. They are misleading. And what they admitted when they were challenged by this, they said, well, what about those students that have medical conditions which would preclude them from being vaccinated? And the school admitted that they don't have the medical record, so that's not taken into consideration.
How difficult is it?
How is that moral, ethical, legal?
Of course it's not. How difficult is it for a family who suspect their child has been injured by a vaccine? Let's take COVID completely out of it here for a second. Let's just say that at the age of 6 months or 12 months or whatever, they take their kid in for a series of shots, and then they notice 2 or 3 days later that the child is not responding the way he or she was. And they go downhill from there. They take the child back to the doctor. The doctor examines the child, and they never seem to get a diagnosis. I've heard this from several people now, where they get bounced around the system because nobody, no doctor anyhow, wants to admit that there's a possibility that this could be a vaccine injury. And we don't even know what condition to call that. I mean, is it autism? Is it like, I don't even know what the condition is called. I do know somebody called Gloria who lives in Winnipeg who's gone through this for over 30 years now. And finally, just a few years ago, she got the diagnosis that it was, in fact, a vaccine injury that caused this huge problem with her daughter. What can families do, if anything, to force the system into a diagnosis?
Well, there's almost nothing they can do, Shadow, is the medical system denies vaccine injury. I mean, I'm the parent of a vaccine injured child that I've lost. And the medical system all the way through said it wasn't the vaccine, it was just a coincidence. My son developed an uncontrolled seizure disorder, which he had his entire life. His seizures were never controlled. At one point, he was seizing 12 to 15 times a day, and each seizure was 15 to 20 minutes long. Pure coincidence, Shadow. They told me he probably would have had a seizure disorder anyways. The fact that it started after the vaccine shot, just a coincidence. So the medical system will not acknowledge vaccine injury. Until 2021, Canada didn't have a vaccine injury compensation program. Every G20 nation except Canada and Russia has a vaccine injury compensation program. So Canada is a laggard on the international stage in recognizing and compensating for vaccine injury.
Seems Canada's a laggard on the international stage for a whole bunch. What about this transing? And by extension, if we're talking about schools now, I'm hearing reports more and more, like this hasn't slowed down. This has actually sped up in the last couple of months, where people are sending me actual documents of emails from principals to parents who are saying that, yes, we will provide your daughter or son or whatever he or she wants to be called that day with a litter box so they can relieve themselves in schools. Are you hearing anything like that at the NCI? Because that definitely would be child abuse of some kind, just by allowing that kind of behavior at all. Never mind the other kids who have to sit there and go, what the hell is this all about now?
Yeah, talk about a disturbance in a classroom. You know, we had a lot of testimony on that too, particularly testimony from Gila Russ Woodland. She's an educator, lifelong educator. She also runs a homeschooling program. And she talked extensively about that. But there was also, just before we leave the vaccines, there was an interchange I had with her in the hearings. And I think it was worthwhile listening to, because they were talking about exactly what Ted was saying, and that was regarding 12-year-old children supposedly able to give informed consent to get these shots.
Right.
So what I asked Gila in the hearing was, you know, you said that you've been teaching for 25 years. Yes. And I said, so can I assume that you know how children of that age group communicate and what they understand? Yeah. And so I said to her, I said to her, so how would you explain genotoxicity to a 12-year-old? And she kind of looked at me, and I said, that's a side effect. It's an effect from the COVID biologics that was never investigated. It's a significant issue. And she says, I don't even know what it is. How could they possibly explain that to them? Did they tell the children that one of the side effects is death? Of course they didn't. So how can these 12-year-old children first understand some of these concepts? And secondly, they were never presented with them in the first place.
Well, to be fair, Ken, I don't think they told anybody that.
That's true. That's
right.
True. But the thing is that Canada is still recommending those shots for these children who are at no risk of COVID anyway. I mean, if you don't believe what the NCI was saying, the government of Alberta just released the Davidson report, and they say exactly the same thing in that report. So why is Canada still forcing these things or recommending these things to children? The UK has pulled them, Florida's pulled them, Finland, Sweden, countries all over the world are pulling them, but Canada is still pushing them.
It's corruption. It's corruption. It's corruption at the highest levels. They're still being paid off. Kyle Kemper, you guys have heard of Kyle Kemper? That's Justin Trudeau's half-brother. He put out another video today. It was all over X. I'm going to play it a little bit later on in the show. And he's talking about, so if you were at a party and you were doing something untoward and somebody slipped something into your drink and next thing you know, it's on video and you get blackmailed, what would you do? And so he goes through this for the first minute and a half of this video. And I'm thinking, what are you saying to us, Kyle? Are you suggesting that somebody, like maybe your brother, has been blackmailed and the reason that he's doing all the things he's done is because he doesn't want the word to get out, which it's too late, by the way? I mean, that kind of thing, I believe, is very prevalent, as you were pointing out, Ken, earlier in this discussion when it came to the young kids and the grooming that happened. But getting back to the trans and the litter boxes and just allowing these kids to pretty much do whatever they want to do. Are we not perpetuating a mental illness or a bad social contagion of some kind? I believe this is the worst social contagion that we've ever seen because kids are losing body parts here.
Yeah. To me, it's criminal behavior, what's happening in our schools. You're right. We're condoning mental illness. We're actually complicit in encouraging it. We had this conversation with my grandchildren and our daughter, and asked if there was any furries in her school. And she said yes, that there's a girl in their schools. This is a 9-year-old that thinks that she's a cat. They have a litter box and she walks on all fours. And so
does she actually think she's a cat, or is she just like, this is the other thing, or is just she doing it to be cool because her friends are cats?
Well,
right?
Getting lots of encouragement for it. Anyways, our daughter said to her daughter, she said, if you think you're a cat, I'm going to put your food outside and you'll be sleeping outside. And we'll end that pretty quick. And to me, that's what should happen. Like, let's not indulge this mental illness. Yeah. I'm calling this child sacrifice now. And I don't think that word is over the top. I think we need to call it for what it is.
Ken, did you have anything else? Because you seem to have something you wanted to say about that before we switched back to the vaccines for a second there. Was there any testimony like that at the Vancouver?
Significant testimony with regard to this whole mutilation of bodies. We had a number of doctors testify about it. As Ted talked earlier, we had a person who was actually subjected to it, and that was Kelly Lynn Peary, who had been abused as a small child. And of course, she was trying to make sure, she wanted in her mind to make sure, because I've spoken to her, she wanted in her mind to make sure that this couldn't happen again. And the doctor's solution was, well, we'll turn you into a boy. And then she was into that whole thing and became a boy. And it was not until I think she was in her 30s or late 30s where she came to realize that, no, she wasn't a boy, and now she's in that long road. And I believe, Shadow, you met her at the
yeah, I've had her on the show. She's we correspond every now and again. She sends me photos. This is because she's transitioning back.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's a long process, like you say, right? And so she's starting to lose the facial hair now, and she's starting to grow her hair back on top of her head. But like you say, it's going to be tough for her to get back all the way. if she ever makes it. And she's fully aware of that. I mean, she's now in her 50s and she understands what this is all about. But kids don't. The kids don't get it. I mean, you're going to say, I'm going to have my breasts removed. I'm going to have top surgery, 16, 17 years old. Do you understand that you're never going to be able to breastfeed a child if you want to have a child moving ahead in your life, just 10 years or less?
And the other thing that the industry, and we had testimony on this too, the other thing that the industry is doing is creating permanent customers. Because once you do this, once you get into this transition surgery and they've mutilated your body parts and you're sterile, and we also had, maybe I can't say this on your show, but we had doctors testify that they can't have orgasms, so they'll never experience sexual gratification. They'll be on drugs for the rest of their lives. There's no long-term or even medium-term studies as to the effects of all of these hormone treatments on a human body. They're saying in the press right now, well, we'll just give you puberty suppressors. That's not true. They have no idea what these things do, and they're not even approved officially. Now, this is interesting in my mind. These drugs are not officially approved for what they're using them for, so they're off-label prescriptions. Now, for your audience, do you remember any other drug that just recently couldn't be used because it was off-label usage? And I'm talking about ivermectin, which has a long safety protocol, but they still wouldn't allow it because it was off-label. But they're using these puberty blockers and these hormone treatments, which are off-label treatments for these children.
Ridiculous.
It's more than ridiculous. It's
You said, how many testimonies did you have in the Vancouver hearings? You guys, lots of them, right?
It was 37 over 3 days, and there were actually 35 separate testimonies, but two of those groups were two people. There was a couple, the Stephans, who I know testified, and they were testifying what the government did to them. And then there was another group where I think it was a mother and son, grown son, and she was there for support for him. So
you guys are coming up in Edmonton now, March 6th, 7th, 8th. Have you got people coming forward to testify about this?
Lots of people, Shadow. There was a huge response after the Vancouver hearings to this question, and many more, like Dr. William Mackis is somebody who said, I want to testify at the next hearings.
Excellent.
So we have a ton of experts that will be testifying in Edmonton. And then we're looking for lay people to tell their stories. And that's a harder one because in many cases, these are stories of abuse, stories of neglect. They're traumatic stories, and it takes a lot of courage, like Kelly Lynn, to tell that story. When she came out and was speaking out against the whole transgender movement and what it did to her, she said the community that encouraged her to transition all of a sudden abandoned her. So, we've seen this all the way through the hearings, haven't we, Ken? As we've had people drop out at the last minute because they're so afraid of effectively being shamed or punished for telling the truth.
How many times did you guys hear the word cult come up in testimony?
Well, I don't know how many times it was used. I mean, I often thought about it. I mean, that we're seeing cult-like behavior for sure.
Well, when somebody tries to leave a cult, what happens, right? Like one of two things. They either get recaptured and brought back, or they get completely and totally excommunicated from the life that they knew for however long they were living it, and now they're completely and totally on their own. It's absolutely astounding. Are you having any trouble? I'm sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, talk about cults. And one of our witnesses, Gila, testified, and they showed video of when they were having these drag queen story hours in the public library. And so she and a group of parents went down there to see what was going on, and she showed video of this. There were these people with the black hoods on and the black umbrellas blocking these citizens from going into the public library, and One of them was wearing a swastika on the coat, and it's in the video. You can watch it on the hearing testimony. So you want to talk about cults. Where in the heck was the CBC when these people, these thugs with Nazi symbology on their coats, were blocking parents from going in to seeing the drag queen story hour?
When you write these reports, and I know that they can be quite lengthy, you're going through all of the testimony and it takes some time. You want to be absolutely accurate in everything that you put into the reports and the recommendations that you come up with as commissioners. Are you still having difficulty getting these reports into the hands of the authorities or the media or politicians who should be paying attention to this stuff? Because this is grassroots information, grassroots testimony right from the people who elect them. If anybody should be listening, it should be federal, provincial, municipal politicians. Have you seen anybody come forward? I can tell by the laughing already that it hasn't happened yet, and that's a shame.
Well, it's interesting. I can give two specific stories, and these are true stories. Back in November, I attended a conservative PC Party of Manitoba meeting. And speaking at that meeting was one of the leadership candidates, Mr. Abi Khan. And Abi told the story about how he got into politics because of all the terrible things that happened during COVID. And so I waited my turn, and I asked Abi a question. I said, Mr. Khan, you say that you got into the whole politics because of what happened during COVID. So if you become the leader of the PC Party of Manitoba and eventually the premier of Manitoba, will you commit, yes or no, to when you first get into office that you'll commission a judicial inquiry into what in the heck happened in COVID? Because education, healthcare are provincial matters. And holy smokes, Jamie Saleh couldn't skate the way Mr. Khan skated around. Now, I also approached what's his name? He's the shadow minister for defense. He's a MP in
Bizan?
Yeah, Bizan. I approached Mr. Bizan and I handed him the NCI report, and he didn't want any part of it. He knew what it was, but it could be a very political document, and we don't want to have any discussions about that. I also approached Ted Falk, who was very familiar with it, and Ted Falk stood up in government and said that they should be doing something, and he was backbenched by the Conservatives. So if people think, don't get me wrong on this, in my opinion, you don't have a choice in your federal election coming up. But if you think because the PCs get in, they're going to make a change when they were part of this, PCs were a part of it, the Liberals were a part of it, the NDPs were a part of it, the Bloc was a part of it. None of them stood up in the Parliament and demanded justice for Canadians. So this is going to keep going. It's getting worse and worse, and it's getting into all kinds of other things, Shadow. This whole WMR thing, I'm going off topic a little bit, but this whole thing is like an undead monster, and it just won't go away. And the NDP in Manitoba has now introduced this Bill 4, which is a monstrosity.
Isn't that the bill where they're making it illegal to ask questions?
Oh, no, but that was just done as an instruction from the WMR to the rural municipalities. What happened was, after the fiasco with the WMR in Manitoba, Mr. Wab Kinew, or Premier Wab Kinew, stood up and he was going to introduce the Freedom Bill, and it was going to allow municipalities to opt out. Well, that ability to opt out was already in the original legislation with no rules. So when they finally introduced Bill 4 in the legislature this session, there's all kinds of requirements in it. If a rural municipality wants to opt out, they have 180 days, and the bill hasn't even passed the third reading and royal assent yet. But it's retroactively active from December 31st, 2024. You got 180 days. The RM has to hold a public hearing, 40 days notice. They have to have it. And
it's a freedom bill too, right? Like a freedom bill with no free. If you have to create a freedom bill, I think I've said this before, then you're living in tyranny. If you have to have a bill that says you're free. And Abi Khan, the terrible things that happened during COVID, well, did he not receive a $500,000 business grant from the government during COVID to start that delivery door-to-door thing that he was doing?
He also did. He also advertised the vaccines. He was part of the ad campaign for those vaccines. And folks,
he was.
folks, I'm getting upset about it. My apologies, but having written that first.
I can see the vein here. Do you
Well,
see that, Ted? You see the vein right here. It's starting to get bulge. I'm sorry, Ken. I didn't mean to point that up. Maybe other people couldn't see it, but I can. I'm
Well,
sorry.
I'll tell you, Shadow, I was on the plane today finishing reading the Davidson Rail report from the Alberta government, which confirmed everything that we said. And sitting there thinking, all of these people were a part of it. But I'll tell you something that gets me even more angry. That the chief medical officer in Manitoba, who retired right after the COVID thing, got the Order of Manitoba Medal for meritorious service for what they did, murdering and killing people, maiming people, having old people dying alone in the old folks' home. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I've spent the last 3 years immersed in this over my head, and I gave a speech once that said, "If you knew what I knew."
I remember.
It's traumatizing. I look at what the commissioners had to sit through in the 30 some odd days of hearings that we've had, the hundreds of witnesses. And I would suggest, and Ken, I think you would agree, is that all of you experience post-traumatic stress disorder.
I know I did.
It's horrifying to hear this testimony from our neighbors, our family, our friends, our community, and to realize that our governments, our media, our judges, our law enforcement, not only are they just being silent, they're actually complicit. Their silence means that they're complicit. I've come to realize Canada is a failed state. I wouldn't have thought that more than 5 years ago, but I'm challenged to have trust in any of these institutions that we expect will provide some accountability, some oversight, some guardrails, some limitations to the excesses of government. I think Canada is in trouble, and when we talk about our children are not safe in this country at this time.
Do you guys have any spots left for any more testimony in Edmonton at the beginning of March, or are you all full?
We're almost full. I think what we would really like is if there's a couple more so-called lay witnesses, people that will tell their story. The experts bring some valid information that really helps to understand the depth of the problem. But what often makes the difference is the heart stories that you never forget, and that's what often makes the difference for people. So we would like a few more of those.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for appearing on the show tonight. Is there anything that we need to remind people of? Go to the website, check out. Go ahead.
We're doing a fundraiser tomorrow night. So February 12th at 7 p.m. in Morinville, Alberta, which is just a little bit northwest of St. Albert. I'm going to be speaking there. Shawn Buckley is going to be doing an introduction on me. And folks, I want to remind you that the NCI is not funded by government. We have no large corporate sponsors. We're sponsored by everyday Canadians, and we need your help. We've held a series of 24 hearings in the first round from coast to coast in Canada. And then we did 3 days of hearings in Regina in the spring of last year. And now we did Vancouver in the fall of last year. We need your support. If you think that the National Citizens Inquiry is important and is informing Canadians and is worth your while, then we need your support. If you can come out, please come out to the Morinville Multicultural Center on this Wednesday night, yet tomorrow. I know you've got a lot of viewers in Alberta, Shadow. And if you can't, please visit our website, nationalcitizensinquiry.ca, and donate if you can, volunteer if you can. But right now, we need some help. We need some financial support. I hate to put it that way. I hate to be standing here with my cup in hand, but to me, the National Citizens Inquiry is one of the most important things that's happened in Canada, and it is a unique in the world right now. So Canada is leading the way in this, and we need your support.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming on tonight. Great wishes for the fundraiser tomorrow night, and of course for the big hearings coming up at the beginning of March in Edmonton. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Shadow.
All right, there is. Oh, I was going to say there is Ken Drysdale and Ted Kuntz from the National Citizens Inquiry. Speaking about kids being safe, our friend Railen Fox has been putting these videos out. As you guys know, the series of videos has been called "Those Books Aren't in My Kid's School." There are 5 parts of this. You could follow her on social media if you want to see them all. Railen, Raelyn Fox. Fox, Railen Fox. Follow her on Instagram. Her videos are up there. They're on Facebook. They're on X. They're on Rumble. And they're quite informative, actually. And they could be in your kids or grandkids. These books could be in your kids or grandkids' public school. You don't even know it, because that's the whole point. The parents don't hear about this stuff unless they decide they want to go into the school and find out for themselves. And many of them haven't got a clue. Why would you go into a school and look for a book that you don't even know about, you've never heard of before? Raylan's got a brand new video out. Now, before you go, I don't want to hear that stuff. This time she's not reading from a book. This is an information video. Here she is.
Hey everyone. As you all know, I've been working hard to raise awareness around the sexually explicit and pornographic books that have made their way into our public schools. Rest assured, I won't be reading from any books today. Instead, I would like to share a news story with you about a man here in Manitoba who was charged with the sexual assault of 2 minors. It reads, a 39-year-old man from Winkler has been charged with a raft of sex offenses after 2 youths come forward to police. The police say the man was known to both of the victims. As a result, the man has been charged with 4 counts each of sexual assault, sexual interference, invitation to sexual touching, and making sexually explicit material available to a child. Now I want to direct your attention to the last line specifically, making sexually explicit material available to a child. Clearly, this is a tactic that sexual predators use to gradually desensitize their victims to sexual content or behavior in order to make it easier to abuse them without raising alarm bells. Railen, what does this have to do with sexually explicit books being made available in our public schools? Well, many would think that sexually explicit material would have to be videos or pictures. However, as per the Criminal Code of Canada's definition, it can also be written material. Written material whose dominant characteristic is the description for a sexual purpose of explicit sexual activity with a person. I would say that the material that I've been reading to you guys over the last number of weeks meets that definition to a T. Wouldn't you agree? Allow me to break this down in the form of a scenario. Imagine for a moment that you are a young teen and these types of sexually explicit books are being made available to you in your school library. You think, well, if this is in my school library, therefore it must be acceptable content for me to be consuming. Those tasked with ensuring my safety when I'm at school would never supply me with something that's unsafe. So this type of material has now been made normal in your mind. And yes, I understand that social media and the internet in general is full of disgusting sexual content that our children are being bombarded with on a daily basis, but it's not coming from a trusted source like a school or a teacher, hopefully. Now imagine for a second that a close family friend of your parents is visiting and privately offers you some of the same type of books or some other type of sexually explicit material, whether it be a video, pictures, or perhaps even a sex toy. He tells you it's perfectly normal and you can trust him. He wouldn't give you anything that's not appropriate or could cause you harm. Then you remember, well, I've read books that talk about all sorts of sex acts in school, so this is probably fine. So now what should have caused a red flag and alarm bells to go off in your head now does not, because you were gradually desensitized to that subject and material over time. The line between appropriate and not is now blurred. This is what we mean when we say the sexualization of children, the removal of all innocence. Another word for this that some don't like is grooming. Now, let me be clear that I am not saying that teachers or education staff that are making these books available to minors are doing it with the intent to sexualize children so that they can take advantage of them. However, it's not unheard of for a teacher or education staff member to be charged with the sexual abuse of a minor. In fact, we've been seeing an awful lot of that in the news lately, and it seems to be on the rise. So what do I mean? I mean that if desensitizing a minor to sexually explicit material is a tactic used by pedophiles and sexual predators to gain access to their victim, By providing sexually explicit materials to minors, schools are potentially aiding in the process and are therefore putting children and teens at an increased risk of falling victim to sexual abuse. Schools are for education. The books within our school libraries are supposed to hold some sort of educational value. That said, to the superintendents and school board trustees of Louis Riel, Pembina Trails, Brandon, Rolling River, and Garden Valley School Divisions, you have the power to make our schools a safer place for our children. Will you do what is right? Will you protect our children by removing the sexually explicit materials being made available in the schools within your divisions? The public awaits your response.
Follow her on social media. She's on Facebook. She's on X. She's on Rumble. She's on Instagram. Railen Fox. And let me spell it for you again. Got a pen? Here's a pen for you. Write it down. R-A-E. There's an E in there, and sometimes that screws people up. R-A-E-L-Y-N-F-O-X. Railen Fox. She puts a lot of work and a lot of research into those videos to try to help. So a little support would be pretty cool. Kyle Kemper. A lot of people have asked me, hey, Shadow, you got to get this guy on the show. And I say, you know, all Kyle Kemper, this is Justin Trudeau's half-brother, by the way, all he ever does is speak in riddles, right? He says something, but he never really says anything. So here's his latest. And feel free to write down in the comments exactly what you think Mr. Kemper is saying here.
To anybody who's been blackmailed out there, or went to a white party, for example, and took a sip of a drink and got a little bit crazy, and then you're a little bit disconnected from reality, and all of a sudden you find yourself participating in some sort of sick ritual, and guess what? You find out later that that was all recorded, and now you need to do what we tell you to do. You're a victim. You were trapped. You may have consciously made that decision, but by giving in to the blackmail and continuing to do the orders and execute the tyranny of the extreme minority that seeks to rule through blackmail, coercion, deception, division, release yourself from them. First, apologize to yourself, forgive yourself, be thankful for that experience. It's tough. And then love thyself, but move forward. And remember, your right action, you can never doubt yourself for taking right action. And you're not alone. There's a lot of people that have been blackmailed and set up and offered deals. And some of you consciously took it because it was the cool thing to do, or you could see, the riches, the wealth, the power, but it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And you're actively contributing to a parasitic energy that is rotting and hindering the growth of planet Earth and civilization, humanity. But again, very strong, resilient system, and there's never been so many awakened wonders across this world, and they're coming together, and the force at which the nonsense, the fear, the deception, the lies has been pushed is only going to create a bigger, stronger reaction out of it. So, to anybody who's been blackmailed under duress, apologize, own it, call it out, name names, ask for forgiveness. You might need to resign. You might have to go to jail. You may have to pay penance in some way, shape, or form. But at least your soul might be saved.
I'm surprised we didn't see smoke billowing behind him. He probably just took a big, huge rip on a bong before making that video. Was he talking to his brother? Because like I say, he says all kinds of stuff, but doesn't say anything. Kyle Kemper, half-brother of Justin Trudeau. Couple of news notes. I always laugh when it happens to other people, and here I am. Hey, some news notes. This is alarming, but then again, remember that everything is corrupt. Everything. You watched the show last night with Dr. Makis. If you're an all-access member, we're going to play you part of the Daniela Camboni show. She talks to Sam Cooper and another guy. He's an investor from the United States. His name is, hang on a second, Marc Cohodes. And they blow the whistle on everything that's going on in Canada right now. And like Ted Kuntz was saying just about 10 minutes ago, I've kind of lost faith in our country. When we say that all of our institutions, from the judiciary to police to government officials, bureaucrats, doctors, nurses, unions, they've all been corrupted, probably by China, the World Economic Forum, criminal organizations. Canada is one big criminal organization. It's the mafia. And anybody who speaks out pays the price, right? But if we all speak out, millions of us, and that's one of the jobs that we have. We have got to find a way to tell people that things are bad. And now look, I don't know if this is true or not, because I'm getting to the point where I'm having trouble trusting anything, even Leger and these polling companies now. New Leger poll. And I know this doesn't happen. You never see a political party, even with a leadership change, and the Liberal Party hasn't even had a leadership change yet. They're still in the middle of their leadership vote contest, whatever they want to call it. But they're suggesting here, Leger is suggesting that if Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership, he would erase the massive lead the Conservatives have enjoyed for the past 18 months. The Leger survey suggests a Carney-led party would boost Liberal support by 6 points to 37%. They're at 31 now. They were at 19 a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and they go up to 31 and now 37. I don't think so. That, because he hasn't said anything. That doesn't happen. So now, and this is only a guess, Leger has been corrupted somehow. They do not care about integrity anymore. The Liberals currently sit at 31%, the Conservatives at 40%, the NDP at 14%. Leger records a 6-point bump in Liberal support since January 26th, after weeks of headlines about Donald Trump's tariff threats and calls for Canada to become a U.S. state. So, am I concerned that there could be a Carney government? Sure. I'm concerned. But what I think is going to happen in this country is much the same thing that happened in the United States when Kamala Harris was getting that bump when she first replaced Joe Biden as the Democrat candidate back in, July or August, whenever that was. Oh, yeah, we love Kamala. The media went crazy on Kamala. And then she lost, because you cannot sustain that kind of momentum for a long period of time when you're a moron. And Mark Carney is already showing signs that he is just that. The steel comment he made, for example, a week and a half ago in that CTV Atlantic interview. How much steel are you using these days, Bob? Trump just slapped a steel aluminum tariff on all countries yesterday, 25%. But of course, Canada is going to pay the biggest price because we ship them the most steel and aluminum. People are already starting to get layoff notices at plants in Hamilton. But if we become the 51st state, never going to happen. We're never going to roll over to a bully. That's what Carney's line is. But anybody with rational thoughts still rolling around in their heads knows that what we've got essentially in front of us right now is a choice between the European Union and the World Economic Forum and China or the United States. My personal belief, and a lot of you guys watching this right now, you're going to hate hearing this, but Canada will no longer be a functioning country within 24 months. It's over for Canada. I'm sorry to tell you that, but that's my opinion. It's either going to be absorbed by the EU or it's going to be absorbed by the United States. And the EU-China thing, World Economic Forum, that particular branch of the cabal, or the other branch of the cabal, which is the United States. At any rate, Canada, it's still going to be called Canada. The flag will still exist. The money probably won't, but everything else is going to seem the same. It's just going to be under somebody else's control. And that could be great, or it could be brutal. We're just going to have to wait and see. But we have appointed, finally, Trudeau has appointed a new fentanyl czar to coordinate the fight against smuggling. This is a joke, actually. It's not to say this guy's a joke, but the whole thing. I mean, one guy is gonna oversee the fentanyl that's coming into Canada, being transported through our country, being made here, all the precursor chemicals being exported via boat, car, aircraft to the United States and other countries. One guy is going to make a difference. But it is fulfilling that promise to Trump, right? So Trudeau today appointed a senior intelligence official to the new post of fentanyl czar, saying he would coordinate the fight against smuggling of the drug. Trump has threatened to impose tariffs, blah, 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 blah. We already know that story. Why do these people always insist on having to give you the entire story? Just tell us the name of the fentanyl czar. It's Kevin Brosseau. He's a former senior policeman who most recently was Trudeau's deputy national security and intelligence advisor. Canada needs a fentanyl czar that will coordinate between agencies, move quickly to tackle challenges, and work closely with our American counterparts to disrupt and dismantle this illegal drug trade crossing the border. That from David McGuinty, the public safety minister of the Liberal government. So we'll see how that works out. Florida Republican to lead task force focused on the JFK files and the Epstein list. This is kind of big. Anna Paulina Luna announced today that she will lead a task force focused on declassifying federal secrets, including documents on the assassination of JFK, files related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. She said this will no longer be a task force that makes bold promises only to fade into irrelevance or send strongly worded letters. This will be a relentless pursuit of truth and transparency, and we will not stop until the American people have the answers they deserve. Senator Ron Johnson, this from Reclaim the Net, demands Meta releases records on COVID-19 vaccine injury censorship. Yeah, okay. Maybe one of these days. Goldman Sachs cancels DEI requirement for IPO companies. And lastly, Vancouver Island Town fires back at Donald Trump by deleting its X account. Ooh, that'll show him. The town of View Royal deactivated. Have you ever heard of that town before? Ooh. Deactivated its X account this week in an attempt to address the U.S. trade war. According to a January 29th statement, on the town's website, the decision was made by Mayor Sid Tobias. Last week, a council member motion elaborated on the move, stating, media reports suggest that Elon Musk, the head of Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, may be using X to amplify the U.S. trade war, as well as undermining elections and amplifying extremist voices. Oh, my God. We're infected with that woke mind virus here. And I'm not sure if these people are actually serious and they believe that nonsense, or if they're corrupted, bought off, paid for, being bribed, whatever. Maybe that Kyle Kemper video was meant to talk to all the people who have been coerced into the cult. Maybe it's not just directed at his half-brother. Daniela Cambone is blowing up on the internet in the past couple of weeks. And today she released an emergency episode with Sam Cooper of the Bureau. I'm going to try and get Sam on the show myself because he does really good work focusing on the smuggling of drugs and humans into and out of Canada. So I'm gonna get a hold of him and see if he'd be willing to come on. Marc Cohodes is a friend of Sam's, and he's an American investor who happens to be interested in the corruption that's happening here in Canada, and he knows a lot of stuff because he's made a lot of contacts. We're going to play this for you in the extension tonight on shadowdavis.com for all access members only. So we'll see you there for comments in the Telegram group, the Shadow at Night community on Telegram, and we'll see you on the website in just a couple of moments. For the rest of you guys, I love you all. I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here, and I will catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com. Be back in 2 minutes.